My family hurt my child and expected silence. Instead, I took her and reported everything, turning their perfect family image into a public scandal. Sophie, my daughter, is 8 now. She's healthy and thriving, and she doesn't recall much from that day 3 years ago. The doctor stated that her youthful age helped her with memory suppression. I am grateful for that mercy, even if I will never forget a single moment. Because context is important, let me start from the beginning. My family has always used a golden child approach. My older sister Isabel was the crown jewel. She married Adrian Lauron, a corporate lawyer, had 2 children, and lived in a beautiful suburban home with a pool. Meanwhile, at 24, I became a single mother after my ex-boyfriend abandoned me the moment I told him I was pregnant. I worked 2 jobs to keep our tiny apartment, got my nursing degree with night classes, and raised Sophie on Resolve and microwave dinners. My parents made their preferences obvious with 1,000 little cuts. Isabel's children received savings bonds for birthdays, and Sophie received $10 gift cards. Isabel's family was prominently featured in Christmas photos with Sophie and I positioned at the frame's edge. My mother would groan whenever I described my difficulties with childcare, but she would drop everything to babysit Isabel. I persuaded myself it did not matter. Sophie had me. I had her. We were sufficient. However, youngsters did notice things. Sophie began to question why Grandma usually hugged her cousins longer. Why did Grandpa play games with Julian, Elena, and Lucas, yet seldom talk to her? I made excuses because I wanted her to have a family other than simply myself. That July Sunday began as any other compulsory family gathering. My dad was cooking in the backyard. My mother was obsessing over Isabel's delicious potato salad. Adrian was preaching about interest rates to anyone who would listen. The kids were racing through the sprinklers, yelling with a delight that only children can have. Sophie was being very good. She'd always worked especially hard at these meetings, as if she could earn their love via flawless behavior. She shared her toys without complaining. When Julian grabbed her favorite plastic unicorn, she said, "Please and thank you." She even complimented my mother's clothing, prompting a distracted pat on the head. Then something happened. Elena, who is 9 and has inherited Isabel's cruel streak, decided she wanted Sophie's cupcake over her own, which sat untouched on her plate. Sophie's cupcake particularly. Sophie had been saving it, eating her sandwich first as I taught her. Sophie moved her plate back as Elena went for it. "That's mine," Sophie remarked gently. "You have your own." Elena's face flushed. She grabbed the platter nonetheless. Sophie held on. The plate flipped, and chocolate frosting sprayed across Elena's white sundress. Everyone fled due to the screams. Isabel emerged first, snatching up Elena as if she had been attacked by wolves. "What did you do?" She sprang at Sophie with such ferocity that I moved between them. "It was an accident," I stated confidently. Elena tried to take Sophie's cupcake. "And now you're calling my daughter a liar," Isabel said, her voice as sharp as glass. Elena replied, "Your brat threw food at her." "That's not what happened." I maintained my tone. "I watched the whole thing," my mother said, already siding with Isabel before hearing the entire story. "For heaven's sake, Clara, can't you control your child? Look at Elena's dress. That's ruined. It's frosting. It'll wash out." I glanced to Sophie, who was transfixed with horror. "Honey, go inside and wash your hands," my father yelled across the yard. "She's not going anywhere until she apologizes." He'd arrived with his beer and his habitual scowl, which he saved for me and Sophie. "Dad, she doesn't need to apologize for defending her own food." He jabbed a large finger at me and said, "Don't talk back to me. You've raised her with no discipline, no respect. She's going to apologize right now, or I'll teach her some manners." Something icy slid down my spine. "You're not teaching her anything. We're leaving." I reached for Sophie's hand, but Isabel grabbed my wrist. "You always do this. You can't just leave every time your kid acts up. She needs to learn consequences." "Let go of me." I wrenched my arm free. My father moved faster than I imagined for someone his size. He grasped Sophie's shoulder before I could respond. She yelped in agony as his fingers dug in. "Dad, please stop." I tried to pull Sophie away, but my mother grabbed my other arm. "Let him handle this," she screamed. "You clearly can't." "Handle what? She's 6 years old," I screamed, straining against my mother's grip. Isabel had stepped behind me and pinned my arms back. My father dragged Sophie towards the home. She was crying and pleading for me, and I was struggling with everything I could muster. But my mother and sister were stronger together. Adrian merely stood there, watching with his phone out, most likely recording for eventual legal protection. "Your trashy little thing needs to learn manners," my father said aloud. He struggled with his belt buckle, releasing the leather off his waist. Pure horror flooded my system. "No, Dad, please stop." He raised the belt. Sophie received the first strike across the back. She yelled. I felt something snap inside my chest. Something fundamental and irreversible. The second strike struck her legs. She tried to cuddle up in a ball, still crying for me. Stop it. Stop it. I was kicking, biting, and doing anything I could to break free. My mom slapped me across the face. Be quiet. You're making things worse. This was the third strike. The fourth. Sophie's cries were becoming weaker. The fifth strike hit her across the shoulders. She collapsed. The strikes landed on her petite form, and she fell silent. Complete silence. Great work, Dad. Isabel's voice was full of admiration. She released my arms as if it were a routine Tuesday afternoon. Now, she won't disobey my kids. My parents crowded around Isabel as if she had spoken something meaningful. My father was breathing heavily as he buckled his belt again. My mother was already brushing Isabel's hair, muttering about how they'd never injure her angels, and how they knew how to raise children correctly. I stood there free finally with my entire body shaking. Sophie was not moving. She was laying on the grass like a broken doll, her small sundress tattered and crimson stains spreading throughout her body. My mother looked to me with winter-like eyes. Pick her up and get out. You've messed up our relationship with your sister's family. Never step foot in this house again. I moved forward on legs that did not feel connected to my body. I crouched beside Sophie and grabbed her in my arms. She was breathing, albeit in short breaths. Her eyes were closed. She had a cut on her forehead from where she had fallen. I rose up clutching my kid and looked at each of them individually. My father is still smirking. Isabel is already scrolling on her phone. My mother remained stone-faced and unyielding. Adrian tucks his phone aside. Elena, Julian, and Lucas watched from the porch as if this were entertainment. I didn't say anything. I carried Sophie to my car, carefully fastened her into her car seat, and drove straight to Street Mary's Hospital. The ER doctor took one look at Sophie and summoned a full trauma team. In minutes, we were besieged by nurses, pediatric specialists, and a social worker. They cut off her dress. They documented every mark, bruise, and welt on that belt. Someone counted 12 different impact sites. Sophie's injuries were photographed by a nurse who was overcome with emotion. She repeatedly apologized to me as if capturing the evidence made her culpable. I squeezed her shoulder and assured her that she was assisting us. Every photograph she took was another nail in my father's coffin. Dr. Helena Fisher, the attending physician, walked me to the corridor as the team continued their assessment. She was younger than I imagined, around 37, with piercing eyes that missed nothing. Your daughter has significant trauma, she stated simply. Apart from the evident contusions and lacerations, I'm concerned about internal problems. She suffered a concussion as a result of the impact to her head from falling. We need a CT scan to rule out any bleeding or swelling in her brain. We're also looking for renal injury and internal bleeding from the hits to her torso. My kneecaps buckled. Dr. Fisher grabbed my elbow and guided me to a chair. I need you to stay strong for her, she added firmly. Sophie needs to know you're here fighting for her. Can you do that? I nodded and forced oxygen into my lungs. Yes, whatever she needs. Good. Now, I need complete honesty from you. Has this happened before? Any previous injuries or episodes of physical discipline from family members? My father has always been rough around the edges, I confessed, the words tasting like ash. He would sometimes hold Sophie's arm too firmly or snap at her in an overly aggressive manner. But he had never hit her before. I swear if I had known he was capable of this, I would not have brought her there. Dr. Fisher took notes on her iPad. The social worker will require this information. I'm required to report suspected child abuse, and this goes beyond suspicion. This was documented, photographed, and observed. The authorities will become involved whether you want them to or not. I want them involved, I declared vehemently. I want everyone involved. I want him arrested and prosecuted, and I want everyone to know what he did to my baby. Something changed in Dr. Fisher's expression, perhaps respect or recognition for a mother's finally unleashed rage. Then we'll make sure you have everything you need to make that happen. Sophie awoke as they were examining her. She was bewildered and in pain when she called for me. I held her hand while they worked, murmuring that she was secure now, that I had her, and that no one would ever harm her again. The social worker pulled me aside. Her name was Annalise Weber, and her eyes were compassionate, but had plainly seen too much. I need you to tell me exactly what happened. So, I did. Every detail, word, and moment. I was held back while my father beat my 6-year-old daughter for refusing to give up her cupcake. We're calling the cops, Annalise explained. This constitutes terrible child abuse. Your daughter has a concussion, several contusions, and perhaps internal bruising. She is being admitted overnight for observation. The police arrived an hour later. 2 detectives, Amelia Novak and Daniel Petrovich. I recounted the story again. They recorded notes, images of Sophie's injuries, and my statement. They asked if anyone else had seen it. My whole family watched. I answered hollowly. My mother and sister were holding me back. My brother-in-law, Adrian Loron, recorded some of it on his phone. Detective Novak's expression darkened. Well, need his phone. Detective Petrovic leaned forward, his voice calm yet demanding. Clara, please walk me through the timeline again. Every detail matters to the prosecution. Begin from the moment you arrived at the residence. So, I did it again. The cupcake, Elena's outburst, Isabel's quick defense of her daughter without seeking questions. My father escalated his verbal threats to physical assault. My mother and sister forcibly restrained me. Adrian Loron is standing there with his phone out like a spectator at a sporting event. You said your mother slapped you, Detective Novak observed. That is assault. Well, be charging her as well. I don't care about me, I said. I care about Sophie. I don't mind that they restrained me and forced me to watch him beat her unconscious. We care about everything. Detective Petrovich informed me. Every charge we can make stick is another guarantee that this will not happen again. Your brother-in-law, Adrian Loron, recorded this. He mumbled something about documenting the discipline that was taking place. I believe he hoped it would provide some protection for them, prove they were only correcting poor conduct. Detective Novak and Petrovic exchanged looks. People always think they're smarter than they are, Petrovich complained. The video will either exonerate or convict them. According on what you've told us, I'm betting on the latter. They visited my parents' place that night. My father was arrested for criminal child abuse. My mother and Isabel were arrested for restricting me and serving as accomplices. Adrian Loron turned over his phone after detectives informed him that deleting evidence was a crime. The footage was damning. My father beat a kindergartner while two women held back the screaming mother, all on video. Adrian Loron stated that he had filmed it expressly to demonstrate that punishment was taking place. He believed it would provide legal protection for them. Instead, it determined their fate. The next morning, Detective Novak returned to the hospital to give me an update. She sat by Sophie's bed, fatigued, but grimly content. We watched the video, she whispered quietly, aware of Sophie sleeping nearby. All of it. 52 seconds of footage that will plague me throughout my career. Your father's lawyer is already attempting to spin it as appropriate discipline. That went too far, but the prosecutor isn't buying it. We're going for the maximum charge. What does that mean? My voice was from crying, rage, and exhaustion. Felonious child abuse resulting in serious bodily damage. If convicted, he faces a sentence ranging from 6 to 14 years. Your mother and sister have been charged with felony child abuse, assault, and false imprisonment for detaining you. Adrian faces false imprisonment and possible obstruction depending on what he does with that footage. He has already given you his phone. He did, however. We're looking into whether he uploaded or provided the footage to anyone. If he shared it with family members or attempted to use it to justify what occurred, he might face extra penalties. Detective Novak took out her notes. I also want to ask you some unpleasant questions regarding your family history. Has your father ever been violent? Have there been any domestic violence incidents? Is there any history of aggression? I reflected on all of my childhood memories. He punished us as children, but nothing compared to what he did to Sophie. He was often angry and yelling. He threw objects when he was angry. Plates, tools, whatever was available. He smashed a hole in the wall once when Isabel arrived home after curfew. When I was 16, he gripped my wrist so hard that it left bruises. And I spoke back to him. Has anyone reported these incidents? No. My mother was always smoothing things out. She said he had a temper, but he didn't mean it. That he had worked hard and earned respect. Looking back, she was helping him, making excuses, and sheltering him rather than protecting us. Detective Novak scribbled swiftly. This pattern of activity supports our case. It demonstrates that this wasn't a unique incident. It is who he is. The district attorney will want to conduct a more formal interview with you regarding this background. Whatever you need, I replied. I will testify. I will give depositions. I'll stand in front of a jury and tell them everything if it's necessary. It might come to that, she cautioned. Defense lawyers may be ruthless. They will try to portray you as a bitter daughter, claim you're exaggerating due of previous family issues. They'll claim Sophie was out of control and need correction. Can you handle that? I gazed at my daughter, small and shattered on the hospital bed, with machines monitoring her vitals and bandages covering her wounds. I can handle anything if it means protecting her. But I wasn't finished. Arrests were only the beginning. While Sophie slept in her hospital bed, I made phone calls. I called my boss at the hospital where I worked and said that I needed to take family leave immediately. I called my landlord and informed him that I would be moving. I contacted Beatrice Morrow, a lawyer who specializes in family law and victim advocacy. Before calling Beatrice, I spent an hour researching attorneys on my phone while sitting next to Sophie's bed. I read reviews, looked up case histories, and looked for someone who was known for being utterly merciless when it came to safeguarding victims. Beatrix's name kept recurring. She had successfully sued the entire school district for failing to safeguard a pupil from abuse. She'd bankrupted a daycare center whose employees had concealed injuries. She didn't only win cases. She annihilated those who harmed children. Her consultation charge was $220, which I didn't have, but I was willing to max out every credit card I had if necessary. Beatrice and I met at the hospital the next morning. She examined everything, including the video Adrian had taken. Her face remained professional, but I noticed her hands shaking when the fifth strike struck. "I'm taking your case pro bono," she explained, "and I'm going to make sure they pay for this in every possible way." Beatrix was in her early 60s with silver hair tucked into a tight bun and eyes that would likely make seasoned judges uneasy. She wore a navy suit that exuded expertise and carried a leather briefcase that appeared older than I was. "Pro bono," I repeated, convinced I had misheard. "But your consultation fee alone is waived along with everything else." She placed her briefcase on the little table in Sophie's hospital room and took out a yellow legal paper and 3 pencils. "I run a very successful practice, Clara. I take cases like yours when they matter, and I don't charge for them because money isn't the most essential factor in these situations. What matters is justice. What important is that your daughter is safe, and that those who mistreated her understand. They chose the wrong family to victimize." Tears welled in my eyes. Since arriving at the hospital, I'd been making mental calculations about how high my medical expenses would be, how I'd afford an attorney, whether I'd need to take out loans or file for bankruptcy. The relief of having someone knowledgeable on my side for free almost broke me. "Thank you," I muttered. "Do not thank me yet. What comes next won't be easy," Beatrix said, clicking her pen. "The criminal case is moving forward, which is wonderful, but I'm going to file a civil suit in which they will lose everything they own. Your parents, sister, and their husbands. We're chasing all of their assets, including their property and retirement accounts. They'll wish that the criminal charges were the worst thing that happened to them. How does that work? Can we sue while the criminal trial is ongoing?" "Absolutely. Criminal and civil cases go in simultaneously. The criminal case establishes guilt and prison sentence. The civil lawsuit establishes financial liability and reimbursement for damages. We will use the criminal conviction to strengthen our civil case, but we do not need to wait for it." Beatrice began writing on her legal pad. "Tell me about their financial position. Do your parents own the house?" "Yes, it is paid off. They purchased it 28 years ago. It's probably worth approximately $450,000 currently." "Good, that is an asset we can pursue." "Your sister and her husband own a house with a mortgage. Adrian made a solid living as a business lawyer. I don't know their actual financial situation, but they live comfortably. Private schools for the kids, new cars, and country club membership. Even great people with assets have something to lose." Beatrice wrote quickly. "This week, I'll file a restraining order to keep them away from you and Sophie. Then comes a legal lawsuit for assault, battery, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and negligent supervision. We will identify all 4 of them as defendants. Negligent supervision. Your sister and Adrian let their children be present during a brutal assault. They exposed their children to trauma. That is legally actionable." Beatrix looked up from her notes. "What age are Isabel's children?" 9, 7, and 5. Elena, Julian, and Lucas. Aged enough to be traumatized. They are young enough to require long-term therapy, which your family incidentally caused. I will urge that CPS evaluate Isabel's suitability as a parent." The notion of Isabel being subjected to the same scrutiny she'd always avoided gave me a wicked delight. She had spent years presenting herself as the ideal mother, the model parent. She'd have to answer for condoning child abuse in front of her own children. While Sophie healed for a week, Beatrice obtained a restraining order against my parents, Isabel and Adrian. She brought a civil complaint for assault, battery, emotional distress, and intentional infliction of emotional harm. She filed formal complaints with Child Protective Services regarding Isabel's suitability as a parent, considering that she had condoned child abuse in front of her own children. Sophie's hospital stay lasted 6 days. The CT scan revealed cerebral enlargement, but fortunately, no hemorrhage. Her kidneys were bruised, but otherwise functioning correctly. The doctors kept her under surveillance, administering pain medicine and monitoring her neurological responses. On day 4, she was alert enough to watch cartoons and eat applesauce. By day 6, she was requesting to return home. I seldom left her side. I slept in a fold-out chair given by the hospital, waking up only when a nurse arrived to check my vitals or administer medication. My boss, a lovely woman named Franciscoca, sent me a care package containing snacks, a blanket, and a message encouraging me to take as much time as I needed. Coworkers donated their PTO hours so that I wouldn't lose money. The nursing community cares for its own. On the 4th day, my phone began ringing with unexpected numbers. I ignored them until I received a voicemail from someone claiming to be my Aunt Monica, my mother's sister. Clara, honey, this is Aunt Monica. I just learned about what happened, and I'm completely terrified. Your mother contacted me from jail to ask for aid with bail. And when she explained why she was arrested, I hung up. I want you to know that I am entirely on your side. If you need anything, money, a place to stay, or someone to watch Sophie, call me. What they did is unforgivable. I saved the message. Then I rescued the 3 others from relatives who had learned about the arrests and were taking sides. My father's brother, Uncle Stefan, left a note saying, "My brother had always been a bully, and he wasn't surprised it had escalated to this." My cousin Allie I, Isabel's age, said she'd testify about how my parents had always preferred Isabel over me. Family splits occur along fault lines, and it appears that my father's aggression was one of them. The restraining order was granted immediately. My parents, Isabel and Adrian, were not allowed to come within 500 feet of me or Sophie. The hearing for the restraining order took place without me present. Beatrice handled the situation with the judge while I stayed at the hospital with Sophie, but she called me later to let me know how things turned out. The judge took one look at the medical records and photos and granted a 6-year restraining order. Beatrice informed us, he said, and I quote, "Anyone who beats a 6-year-old unconscious has forfeited their right to family contact. Your father's attorney tried to argue it was an overreaction, and the judge threatened him with contempt. 6 years? That was longer than I had hoped. It could be extended if needed. Restraining orders are frequently issued in cases involving child abuse. But here's the interesting bit. Adrian's law firm dismissed him this morning. Apparently, having an attorney prosecuted for false detention is terrible for their reputation. Who knew? Beatrix's voice was filled with sarcasm. They've already fired him. The trial hasn't even started. Morality clauses in job contracts are lovely things. His firm includes a rule concerning how an attorney should conduct themselves. Being arrested and charged with facilitating child abuse qualifies. He's been legally terminated. Thus, his income has reduced to 0. I felt a flash of fierce ecstasy. Good. Things get better. Isabel's country club became aware of the incident and terminated her membership. Apparently, other members have threatened to leave if she is allowed to stay. She has also been asked to step down from the PTA at her children's school. How do you know all of this? I have a paralegal that is excellent at obtaining information. Also, your sister made the mistake of posting a diatribe about being persecuted on Facebook, which turned out about as well as you'd anticipate. People began circulating news articles about the arrests. She's been receiving death threats. I should have felt awful about it. Perhaps the old Clara would have, but the new Clara, who had witnessed her daughter's beating, couldn't feel any sympathy. Is she in danger? I doubt that the threats are serious, only keyboard warriors. But she's locked down her social media, which suggests she's beginning to realize the repercussions of her conduct. The criminal trial proceeded extremely quickly, taking only 10 months from arrest to trial, which is unusual for felony cases. The video footage and the blatant nature of the crimes sped up the process. My father pleaded not guilty, stating that he was only disciplined an unruly youngster. His lawyer attempted to argue for parental rights and traditional discipline. The prosecution, led by Associate District Attorney Katarina Vogel, dismantled that defense. She was a woman in her 40s, with a steel spine, and a special goal to combat child abusers. When she was young, her own brother perished as a result of parental violence. According to courthouse chatter, the defendant is not the child's parent. Vogel stated during opening remarks, "He is the grandfather. He has no legal right to punish this child. Even if he did, 12 hits with a leather belt that caused unconsciousness, concussion, and serious bodily injury is hardly disciplined. It's an assault. It's a battery. It is a crime." The jury was given a video. Several members clearly reacted. A woman covered her mouth. A man in the back row shook his head frequently. Sophie's screams rang through the courtroom speakers, and 2 jurors wiped their eyes. I testified on the 3rd day. The defense counsel, Victor Schumann, who appeared to regret taking on this case, attempted to present me as an overly dramatic, spiteful daughter. "Isn't it true that you've had a rocky relationship with your parents for years?" he asked. "Yes," I replied honestly. "They've always favored my sister over me and treated my daughter as less important than her cousins." "And isn't it true you've been looking for a reason to cut them out of your life?" "No, I kept bringing my daughter around, hoping they'd treat her better, hoping they'd love her the way grandparents should." My voice was rasping. "I gave them several chances to be kind to her. They chose cruelty. But you admit there was existing animosity. I admit I was stung by their favoritism. I do not admit that I made up what happened. The video does not lie, Mr. Schumann. You have seen it. Everyone has seen it. My father beat my 6-year-old daughter unconscious while my mother and sister restrained me. That occurred. No amount of implying I'm dramatic alters that truth. Katina Vogel grinned as I stepped down. The jury deliberated for 90 minutes, guilty on all counts. When the verdict was read, my father's face became gray. My mother, who was seated in the gallery, began sobbing. Isabel sat stone-faced beside her, most likely calculating her own trial outcomes. Sentencing occurred 2 weeks later. My father was condemned to 5 years of state jail. My mother and Isabel both received 20 months for their roles. Adrian received a 9-month sentence and a large fine for false imprisonment. Katerina Vogel had fought for the maximum on all charges. My father received a 5-year term because the judge recognized his age and lack of past criminal record. However, he made it obvious that if it had been up to him alone, the penalty would have been longer. Mr. Bauer, Judge Hinrich Keller replied, looking over his spectacles at my father, I have been on this bench for 25 years. I've witnessed a lot of child abuse incidents. What distinguishes yours from many others is the brutality of your attack and your complete lack of remorse. You've demonstrated no accountability or comprehension of the hurt you caused. You blamed a 6-year-old youngster for your own conduct. That tells me you're exactly the type of person who should be in prison. My father attempted to speak, but Judge Keller raised his hand. I am not finished. Your daughter tried to shield her child from you, but you still damaged the youngster. You created a traumatic brain injury. You left permanent scars, and when you finished, you felt proud of yourself. The video captures you smirking at what you had done to an unconscious kindergartner. The judge's voice increased. 5 years in state prison, followed by 8 years probation with mandatory anger management and parenting classes. Though I doubt you'll ever be trusted near a child again. My mother and Isabel were convicted simultaneously. Judge Keller was equally tough on them. You two claimed you were trying to prevent the situation from escalating, remarked the judge. But the evidence indicates that you were active participants. Mrs. Bauer, you hit your own daughter when she asked you to stop her father from hurting her child. Miss Isabel Luron, you praised the assault. You praised it. That kind of brutality to your own niece is unbelievable. Isabel's counsel attempted to plead for leniency on the grounds that she had young children who needed her. Judge Keller remained unmoved. Your children saw you facilitate and praise child abuse. That is exactly why Child Protective Services is involved in your case. Perhaps 20 months in jail will allow you to think on the example you've set for them. Adrian's sentence was almost anticlimactic. 9 months for false incarceration with a $60,000 fine rendered him pale. His public defense attempted to explain that he was simply a bystander who made the wrong decision to video rather than intervene. He was a bystander who chose documentation over decency. Judge Keller explained, as a lawyer, he knew better. As a human being, he ought to have known better. 9 months. But prison time was insufficient for me. I wanted them to feel the same sense of grief I did when seeing my daughter be beaten unconscious. Beatrice was an expert at financial warfare. She went for everything. The civil trial started 6 months after the criminal convictions. By then, my parents had virtually depleted their resources on legal bills. They had taken out a second mortgage on their property, which had been paid off for many years to pay for my father's defense attorney. Isabel and Adrian Loron had depleted their joint accounts, sold Adrian's high-end automobile, and were late on their mortgage payments. Beatrice sensed blood in the water. Here's what we're asking for, she stated at a strategy meeting. Medical expenses for Sophie, past, present, and future. This includes her hospitalization, continued therapy, and any experts she may require. We estimate $220,000 in medical costs over the next 12 years. $220,000. My mouth became dry. A conservative estimate. Trauma therapy is not cheap and Sophie will require it far into her adolescence, if not longer. Then we ask for anguish and misery. Your and Sophie's missed salaries, both past and prospective, have had an impact on your job advancement. Emotional grief and punitive penalties to punish them for their behavior. How much total? I am seeking for $2.5 million. I hope to receive between $700,000 and $1.1 million, depending on the verdict. $2.5 million. The figure was astonishing. They do not have $2.5 million, but they have assets that we can seize. Your parents' house, retirement funds, and any savings or investments. Isabel and Adrian's home, automobiles, Adrian's 401k, and Isabel's inheritance from your grandma. We will take all we can, and if they are unable to pay in full, we will garnish their paychecks for the rest of their life. The civil trial moved faster than the criminal one. The guilty convictions in the criminal case performed the majority of the work for us. We only had to prove damages, which was simple with medical bills, therapy invoices, and expert evidence. Sophie's therapist, Dr. Matthias Klene, testified to her ongoing trauma. Sophie has nightmares 3 to 4 times every week. She feels uneasy with older guys, especially those that resemble her grandfather. She has to miss school on sometimes because of panic episodes. Her trauma will take years of consistent therapy to process. Dr. Fisher testified regarding Sophie's injuries and their long-term effects. The concussion she sustained can have long-term implications on cognitive development. We will not know the full damage for years. The scars on her back and shoulders are permanent. I testified about the financial hardship, the emotional toll, and Sophie's reaction when others raised their voices. Beatrice went me through every incident, presenting a picture of widespread devastation produced by a single afternoon of violence. The defense argued that we were asking for too much money, that my family did not have such riches, and that we were attempting to financially destroy them out of spite. They destroyed themselves. Beatrice responded in her concluding argument. My client is merely seeking reimbursement for the harm they did. They decided to beat a child. They chose to facilitate and celebrate the beating. They chose to place their own egos over a young girl's safety. They now have to pay for their choices. That is not spite. That is justice. The jury gave us $900,000. Not the full $2.5 million, but enough to bankrupt them. My parents had to sell their home to cover legal bills and the initial civil judgment. A young couple from Italy bought the house they had raised us in, but it was filled with images of Isabel's perfect family. My parents relocated to a tiny apartment in a bad neighborhood. Aunt Monica told me that my mother grieved for days as they packed up to go, talking about how unjust it was, how they'd lose everything for one small error. Aunt Monica explained that beating a child unconscious was not a mistake. It was a decision. My mother stopped calling her after that. The house sold for $475,000. After paying off their second mortgage for legal bills, court costs, and the realtor, they contributed around $200,000 to the judgment. The remainder of my parents' payment came from liquidating my father's $401k, which had approximately $280,000, and my mother's IRA, which held approximately $15,000. My parents paid for the judgment with their home and retirement assets, totaling about $585,000. Isabel and Adrian Loron were responsible for the remaining $315,000. Their home went into foreclosure, but before the bank repossessed it, they negotiated a short sale that won them approximately $48,000 after their mortgage was paid. Adrian's $401k held really $92,000. Isabel's inheritance from my grandmother was $72,000, which she kept in a separate investment account. Their automobiles, jewelry, and other possessions were liquidated for an additional $28,000. They were able to raise approximately $240,000, leaving them with an outstanding balance of $35,000, which would be deducted from any future earnings. Their retirement, security, and carefully crafted existence have all been destroyed. Isabel's life collapsed spectacularly. Adrian Loron's law business sacked him the instant the conviction appeared on his record. No law firm wants an attorney with a criminal history for false imprisonment. He was unable to find a job in the legal area. They had to withdraw their children from private school. The luxury home went into foreclosure. The foreclosure happened quickly. Without Adrian's income and growing legal fees, they missed 3 mortgage payments in a row. The bank began action. They attempted to sell before foreclosure would affect their credit, but houses take time to sell and they were out of time. I heard more from Adrian's younger brother, Nicholas, who came out to apologize on his family's behalf. Nicholas had always been decent. He'd actually spoken out at a family gathering once when my father was being really harsh with Sophie, and he'd received a lecture about minding his own business. They're moving in with Adrian's parents, Nicholas told me over coffee. His mother and father own a 3-bedroom home in Spain. Adrian, Isabel, and 2 kids share one spare bedroom. It is going to be hell. They made their own choices, I remarked without sympathy. I understand. I simply wanted you to know that not everyone in the family believes you are incorrect. What they did to Sophie was horrific. Adrian should have stopped it. Instead, he shot it like a sociopath. Nicholas testified at the civil trial, discussing Adrian's inclination to prioritize his personal interests over ethics, as well as Isabel's history of condoning unethical behavior in order to maintain her place as the favorite child. His testimony contributed to the pattern of neglect and brutality that marked my family. Better. CPS extensively investigated Isabel. Having your children witness you facilitating child abuse and cheering it is likely to trigger warning flags. Her children were temporarily placed with Adrian's parents while she completed mandated parenting lessons and a psychological evaluation. Mutual acquaintances told me about the glances she received around town, the gossip, and the ostracism from her country club connections. The civil litigation was a masterpiece. Beatrice went for everything. Even my parents' retirement funds and Isabel and Adrian Loron's residual possessions. The judgment was $900,000, which included Sophie's medical expenses, therapy fees, my lost wages, pain and suffering, and punitive damages. They couldn't pay right away, but we had legal means to collect. Bankruptcy loomed. My mother had to return to work at the age of 62. This time as a clerk at a budget store. My father would leave prison and return home with little. Isabel and Adrien Laurent's marriage disintegrated due to financial pressure. They filed for divorce 9 months after their trial. I took Sophie and relocated 3 hours away to a smaller city where I'd been offered a position at a better hospital with superior benefits. We made a fresh start. New housing, new schools, fresh beginnings. Sophie started therapy with Dr. Matthias Kleene, a wonderful child psychologist who specializes in trauma healing. Sophie healed slowly and gently. The nightmares occurred less regularly. She smiled and played again. She made acquaintances at her new school who had no idea what had happened. She's joined a soccer squad. She laughed as I tickled her. She was still my Sophie, only with some wounds that could never fade. My mother contacted me from an unknown number one day, around 2 years later. I banned all of their contacts, but she had become clever. "Clara," she remarked when I responded. Her voice sounded elderly and worn down. "Please, we need to talk. We have nothing to discuss. Your father is getting out in 2 years. We have nothing left. Isabel's marriage is over. Her children barely talk to her. Can't we find a way to go past this?" I didn't feel anything while responding. "You held me down while your husband was beating my daughter unconscious. You instructed me to pick her up and depart. You prioritized Isabel over your granddaughter's safety. There is no getting around that. Is she fine now? Children are resilient. We have lost everything, Clara, everything. Do you have any compassion?" Sophie has scars on her back that will never fade. She has nightmares in which she reaches out for me, but I can't reach her because you and Isabel are holding me back. She cringes when outsiders raise their voices. But sure, she is alive and recovering, which is more than you deserve. We're your family. You stopped being my family the moment you decided hurting a 6-year-old was acceptable. I paused to ensure she heard every word fully. Sophie is my family. You are merely people who share my DNA. Lose my number. I hung up and blocked the new number. My mother tried to reach out to other relatives. I also shut that down. Anyone who urged that I forgive or forget was promptly gone from my life. I formed a new set of friends who recognize that safeguarding your child is not optional. Isabel attempted to send a letter from Beatrix's office. Beatrice forwarded it to me, with a letter stating that I did not need to read it. I did it anyhow. It was 6 pages of self-pity, blaming me for ruining her life and claiming that what happened was not serious and that I had overreacted. I shredded it without responding. The most pleasant moment occurred approximately 2 years following the occurrence. I was at a coffee shop near my new job when I ran into Gabrielle, an old family acquaintance. She had attended the cookout but had to leave early due to another commitment. She had heard everything that transpired subsequently. "Clara, my God," she exclaimed, grabbing me into a hug. "How is Sophie?" "She is good, very good. Actually, thriving." Gabrielle smiled with real affection. "I'm very happy. I testified at the trial. I told them how your parents always favored Isabel and how I'd witnessed your father be rough with Sophie at previous parties." "You did?" "Of course. What they did was awful." She gripped my hand. "I also want you to know that no one from our old circle speaks to your family anymore. Last month, your mother wanted to join our reading group, but 3 individuals walked out. She is not welcome any place. Neither is Isabel." That truth nestled in my chest like warm honey. I hadn't sought for that level of social justice, but knowing that their community had turned them down felt appropriate. "Thank you for testifying," I said. "It helped. I just said the truth. That is all any decent person would do." Sophie and I are enjoying our lives right now. She is now in 2nd grade playing soccer and learning to play the piano. Her buddies come over for sleepovers and birthday parties. She continues to meet Dr. Matthias Klein once a month to check in and process things as she grows and gains a better understanding of what transpired. Sometimes she asks about her grandparents. I keep my responses age-appropriate and honest. "They made some terrible decisions that affected you, so we don't see them anymore. Our goal is to keep you safe." "Do they miss me?" she inquired once. "I think they probably do," I responded cautiously. "But missing someone doesn't fix what they did wrong." She thought about it, nodded, and returned to her coloring book. "I still have difficult days. Days when I recall those moments in the backyard where I felt my mother's hands on my arms and heard Sophie scream. On those days, I recall myself of what followed. Justice, protection, and the new life I created for us. People occasionally wonder if I regret how hard I pursued my family. The solution is straightforward, not for 1 second. When it came down to it, they showed me who they truly were. They prioritized harshness over compassion, image over integrity, and convenience over conscience. They harmed my child and asked me to accept it. Instead, I ensured that they recognized that their actions had repercussions. Real long-term terrible repercussions. My father is imprisoned and has lost both his freedom and his dignity. My mother, who is in her 60s, works for a minimal pay and barely makes ends meet. Isabel's ideal existence has been shattered into bits that she will never fully reconstruct. Adrian's career is over. Every day, they bear the consequences of their decisions. Meanwhile, Sophie and I are creating something wonderful out of the ashes of that dreadful day. We have tranquility, we have safety, we have each other. And, to be honest, that is the best form of vengeance. They believed they could break,